Mmm.
Hi, and welcome back. It's another episode of Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that bring them to you. And tonight we bring a house full of what I feel sure is going to be trouble, mirth, mayhem, and so forth. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and before we go too far, let's find out who all is bringing in the stuff to stack up those to-be-read piles. Joelle, you're up first.
Hi, I'm Joelle. You can call me Joelle or JD Blackrose, which is my pen name. And I write the books you sort of see behind me. And the one that's coming out May 17th is a continuation of the Summoner's Mark series, which you can see the first 3 here. So there's a novella after that and another book. And now the next one is coming out.
Layla?
Hi, I'm Layla Dorine. I write LGBTQ fiction and romance, heavy on the bikers, rockers, shapeshifters, and pretty much any subgenre, daddies, littles, pets, and anything else I can throw in there.
And when you need that shifter next time, JD becomes a number of things. So anyway. Nancy.
Yeah, thanks for that lead in. I'm Nancy Dunne. I write mostly high epic fantasy, but also dabble in steampunk adjacent, which I've heard now is called Gaslamp, and Portal/lit RPG.
JD, the other JD.
Well, but I'm not the other white mate. I'm kind of a little latte. Greetings, fellow humans. My name is JD Estrada. I'm a Puerto Rican indie author. I'm a genre whore. And anything that I can wrap my head around, I want to write that. That includes middle grade nonfiction, poetry, and horror in Spanish and urban fantasy. Urban fantasy, I have a series that I finally finished. People can't nag to me anymore about that, and I'm so happy. It's got angels, demons, and vampires that do not sparkle.
Yay!
Joshua.
My name is Joshua Palmatier. I write epic fantasy novels. So I'll talk about my latest one here tonight. And I also run the small press Zombies Need Brains that publishes themed anthologies. We also started up a magazine called ZNB Presents. And so the main topic tonight is the upcoming anthology from the magazine. So.
And Van.
I'm Van Allen Plexico, and I write science fiction, fantasy, superhero, space opera, crime, heist, period, sports nonfiction, comics history nonfiction, and I've won 4 best novels for pulp and 1 for thriller from the Pulp Factory and the Imagine Awards.
So, Joelle, let's find out a little bit. What's the world you're dropping us into in this series? So this is number 4 on top of the novella?
No, it's number 6, actually.
6.
So I only have 3 books up here behind me, but that's
I'm behind.
Yeah. But,
how many times? Yeah.
So
that's
the first
what you get
one
for
is
giving me an orange hat.
Yeah, the way to think about it is the first one's the red one. That's how everyone knows it. It's the red book. The second one, so that's called Demon Kissed. The second one is Fake Cross. The third one is Hellbound. Then I put this little novella in called Samhain's Bargain just for fun because I wanted to do something around Halloween. And then there was Wish Magic, and now this one, which is called Pinky Promise. When we first meet our heroine, Bex, in the first book, the red book, she's a summoner, and she has a little mark on her wrist called the Kiss, which marks her as a summoner. But a summoning has gone horribly, horribly wrong. And she did fix it. But now she owes a demon a favor and she doesn't know what he's going to ask, when he's going to ask it, or what happens if she says no. And that's where the series starts and hijinks ensue. And she meets and befriends a 6-foot-tall fairy with pink wings whose name is Pinky. And in the first book, Pinky has a problem, which is that he's forgotten how to go small and he can't get home. So she needs to help him with that. And he becomes someone she cares about a lot. And in Wish Magic, Pinky winds up, for reason, sacrificing his magic to save the world, basically. And she makes a promise to Pinky that she's going to help him get that magic back. So that's why it is called Pinky Promise. And they do latch pinkies. I knew this book was going to be called Pinky Promise way back when I wrote the first one. Like, I've been leading up to this. So she has some things she has to do, and it includes going back into Fairy and facing Queen Titania, which she really, really, really doesn't want to do for lots of reasons. But she this time has a secret ally, and that is a wolfhound named Frisia. And so I gave her a dog, which I promised her in book 2, in the Green Book. So finally, a lot of things are coming together. So she has to go into Fairy, and she's got this very, very special Irish wolfhound. And the book actually has a picture of the wolfhound on the cover. And so I'm hoping people who have no idea what this book is about or what the series is about just goes, oh, look, a dog, and decides to try it out. So that's where we are, and that's what's coming out at the end of this week.
All right, Layla, what world are we falling into this time?
So this is book 3 of my Poly Biker BDSM series. It's called Saint's Sinner, and it picks up where book 2, Claiming Cody, left off. It is an actual full-on continuation, because if I had tried to put all of this story in that story, the book would have just been too big. So book 1, Burning Luck, kind of set it up. And then in book 2, you see Lucky's best friend Cody kind of get his happily ever after, except the very end of the book, they got called home because Sin has gone missing and nobody can figure out where he's at. And so the book I'm working on and will come out on May 24th, Saint Sinner, actually picks up with them searching for who's grabbed Sin, where is he at. And I just thought the hunt for Sin was just the best fun thing to play off of, especially since one of his partner's names is Saint. So Saint is hunting for Sin. We can have all the jokes we want about that. And they are literally like, these guys have gone legit back in the first book. And so they've got a club, and they've got a bar, and they've got a tattoo parlor, and they've got a dungeon, and they've got some other stuff that they're dabbling in. And they're all trying to like make their money legit, and things keep happening that just pull them slightly on the wrong side of the law. And most times it's vengeful. I'm probably going to upset some of my readers when they find out who has Sin. But I think they will appreciate that in this book, nobody has to be set on fire like in book 2.
What? No barbecue? Anyway.
No, not this time. Sadly, so far. I do have that one last chapter to write.
And he's without sin can cast the first stone.
Yes.
Or the first charcoal briquette.
Very true. And actually, the first chapter header is actually he who is without sin.
There it is. Genius.
All right, Nancy, what world are we stepping into?
This is a continuation of my high fantasy series. So the world is Arana. It has been described as a D&D campaign without the Mountain Dew and the overbearing GM. May or may not have written it that way. Don't know. This is the 8th book in that series. They're divided up into the Forest War, which is a duology, the Nature Walker trilogy, and this one is going to be part of the Guardians of Arana. And I am terrible with spoilers, and so I never know what to say. But the gist is that in the Nature Walker trilogy, we find the Nature Walker, who is the supreme druid in the forest, the spiritual liaison, if you will, the hippie tree hugger like me. And then in the Guardian series, that's when they've put the world to rights, and now they're going to make sure it doesn't go off kilter, which of course it's going to. But Hero is the one that's coming out next month, and Hero sees our main characters from the Nature Walker trilogy stepping into a new role as parents. The idea I have is that this is going to be the beginning of a series of new characters, because God love the Dragonlance books, but after a while I was like, okay, they cannot still be running around having adventures. They can't. I know he's a half elf, but come on. So Hero is the first one to introduce a new younger character, and that is Kazka. And she was, her creation was aided by god magic, because her parents, one being an elf and one not being an elf, couldn't really have children. So she has a purpose, and Hero is the beginning of her quest to find out what her purpose is, and how the goddess who helped in her creation wants to use her, or how potentially she can avoid that destiny and create her own destiny. It's different from my other ones in that there's not a whole lot of questing going on. There's not a bad guy. There is a bad guy, but there's not an overarching big bad guy that takes 3 books to get through and all this. This is very much a character-driven look at this new creation, this offspring of my Nature Walker and the feline humanoid, the Raja of Katunari. So that's Hero.
So we got to raise a sapling. Got it.
Yeah.
All right, JD.
So I finally finished The Human Cycle. What is the human cycle? It is my exploration of humanity through fiction, which is really, really, really high end. And it's basically, it was going to be 4 books. And then I found out that I'm just insisting on the number 4 just because I'm stubborn that way. And I was like, it's going to be a trilogy. I hate the cliche, but it works as a trilogy. And then it just made more sense and more sense and more sense. Nathaniel Reynolds is a reporter who absolutely despises and hates his job. He jaded is a really good way to describe his motivation for work. And he realizes that, wow, the day can't suck anymore, and he couldn't be more wrong, because he goes into the subway after having his wonderful half-star dinner, which was a stale pretzel from the subway. And then he gets abducted. When he finally wakes up, a vampire says, "Oh, it's so good that you woke up and that you're okay, because we need to save the world." He's freaking out. And obviously, Daniel of Montricker, who's the vampire, he says, dude, no worries. You got 2 options. You can either be dinner or you can help me save the world. And it's the exploration of how much he's willing to sacrifice of his humanity to save humanity. First book is Only Human. Here it is. Second book is Shadow of a Human. Here it is. And finally, which I've been nagged to no end, Beyond Human, book 3. So this is a good contribution to a book fort. If you can hear this, that means that it's got good weight to it. It's over 300,000 words. It's not high fantasy. I know some people, they go like 300,000. That was my first manuscript. And I go like, dude, bear with me. So what happened? The first book focuses more on the physical aspect of what happens to Nathaniel and what he's facing. And all of us have cardinal points. The thing is that everyone has cardinal points. And when I say everyone, that means also vampires. That means also Therians. Please don't call them werewolves. They do take offense. Every single living being has cardinal points, which are like pressure points, and that can get unlocked. The thing is that this JD might have 8. The other JD might have 9. Other people on this panel might have 10 or 5. And it doesn't matter. And it doesn't, I wanted to show variety. When I say that I wanted to show variety, is that not all the vampires have the same powers. Not all the vampires have the same attitudes. Not all of them have the same poses and the hissing. That they don't all do that. Because as living beings, we're changing, we're different. And I love taking cliches and just mucking them up and shaking them. and doing something weird and flipping genders and genres and different things. So the first book also is very classic JRPG or RPG, classic RPG. It's linear. It starts in a nondescript place in the US, then it crosses the Atlantic, then it goes to Spain, it goes to France, it goes to the island of Crete, it goes to Alexandria, it goes up the Nile, goes to Eritrea, it goes to the Red Sea, it goes to Djibouti because I wanted to use that country name because it's so fun to say Djibouti. It goes to Sri Lanka and it ends up in Myanmar. I wanted to explore all these places because all of these places are not common. It's not London, it's not New York, it's not Chicago. It's a bunch of places that either I've been or I've been fascinated by. I wanted it to be linear. And then in Shadow of a Human, that explores more the psychological aspect and all the things, the price that Nathaniel had to pay for the power that is unlocked in book 1. Yes, he's mighty, etc. But dude, it comes at a cost and it's not easy and it's not fun. Basically, he is fractured. He is fractured and separated from his reflection. He is fractured and separated from his shadow. He is fractured and separated from his anima, his female aspect, and his inner child. And he has to reconcile all of these things. Somehow, some way. Does that mean that he has to go into weird places? Of course it does. For that one, since it's also called Shadow of a Human, there are two narratives that are running kind of parallel. They're not mirrors of each other. They're not shadows, but they are running parallel until eventually they meet back up. At the end of that book, I will not give you spoilers, but there is something very important that happens, which leads us to Beyond Human. Beyond Human. So we've already explored the body. We've already explored the psyche. We have to explore the soul. Here, we explore more in depth the mid-dimension. Throughout the series, there's a mid-dimension called Hayun. Hayun, the best way that I can describe it, it is the consciousness of the world. And the thing is that it is shaped by the prevailing information and attitudes and ideas of the world, meaning that what's happening currently does influence how that world is shaped. Think of Dark City. If you see that setting, it has a lot of influence from that Hayun meaning. In Beyond Human, we explore the earth and we explore all of the planes of existence. Does that mean that we visit purgatory? Of course it does. Does that mean that we visit hell? We touch upon it because people fantasize so much about hell that I want to explore the different places. And I think that it's more interesting to explore a different way of expressing limbo and expressing purgatory than going to hell, which everyone goes like, oh, hell, and they got off on that. What's the influence for this Dante Alighieri? Yes, there's a chapter called Al Dante for a very good reason. You should read the book to find out. In the end, we explore all the things that have to do with humanity because got to save the world. So how are we going to take something as typical as the hero's journey and do something different with it? Throw in some vampires that don't sparkle. Throw in angels that don't know how to laugh. Throw in a couple of people, a character based on Bill Hicks, characters based on Lane Staley, characters based on Shannon Hoon, characters based on Chris Cornell, characters based on Mark Lanigan. Yes, characters based on Eddie Vedder. Does it show that I'm a 90s child and that I love grunge? Possibly. The second book has a character based on Rosie from A Whole Lotta Rosie from AC/DC. That said, that means that I love music. So if you like Easter eggs, get ready. This is a smorgasbord of Easter eggs and randomness. And I like to keep it random. And I like looking at things not completely in a different, unique, unconventional way. Just something that you go like, huh, that's weird. And then I go like, okay, give me your hand and we're going to get weird. Or not so much weird. I once said weird and someone said like, you're not that weird. And I said, you're completely right. I am random. Random, but there is an association to it. Had a lot of fun with it. It was very cathartic in many ways. There are characters based on a lot of people I know, including my wife and my mom. And for me, not only to have an author name based and as a tribute to my mom and to have a character based on mom, That's some serious business. And I really hope, if you don't like anything of the book, I hope that every time that Mrs. Fawn is on the page, that you fall in love with her a little bit. Also, last note, basically all the major decisions and the major tide shifts, thank the women for that.
Well, we know the captain, so Joshua, how about you? What world are we falling into with this continuation?
Well, first of all, the book one of the new epic fantasy is finally coming out is Crystal Lattice. I actually have a cover to show you this time, Crystal Lattice. And in this particular world, my main character is a mathematician. And I felt all of you shudder there, but he's a mathematician because I am a mathematician. And he's basically, at the beginning of the book, he's basically attempting to pass his qualifiers. If you've never been to grad school, you have to pass qualifiers before you can really study for a PhD. So I took a lot of my frustration and pain and channeled it into the first part of this book. So a lot of that is from the real world, from me getting my PhD in math. So if you feel some of that a little heavier than the rest of it, then that's why. But anyway, he's attempting to pass his qualifiers and he fails again. And so he has like one last chance. And so what he does is the main character starts to watch the mages. And he realizes that there's a pattern behind the magic that they're doing, even though they don't know the pattern themselves. They're just like waving their hands, and when they wave it this way, this happens, and when they wave it that way, that happens. And he starts to figure out what the underlying structure is. And it turns out to be a mathematical structure under the magic itself. And so even though he can't do magic himself, my tagline for the book is the most powerful magician in the world can't do magic, because he knows how all of the magic works, and the mages don't. And of course, this causes major problems for him because the mages don't like this, and the book basically takes off after that when he runs into trouble with the mages. And then there's a whole bunch of political intrigue and cities at war and all that kind of stuff. The series is called the Crystal Cities series. Crystal Lattice is book one, came out on April 1st, and the book two is going to come out on August 1st. So you can watch for that as well. And I need to finish book three, but it's supposed to come out on December 1st this year. So they should all be out this year, by the end of this year. So that's the novel that's coming out. But most of this is really about the upcoming anthology from the Zombies Need Brains press. That's coming out July 1st. So that anthology, basically, it's called ZNB Presents Year 2, which basically explains it all. It's all 24 stories that we released over the last year for the magazine ZNB Presents. So it's all of the stories, all of the illustrations that went with the stories, all in one volume. So it's out in ebook and will be out in trade paperback as well. If you are a Patreon patron for it, then of course, depending on what tier you're on, you'll get the ebook or the trade paperback for free, basically, for following the Patreon. But everybody else can buy it as well. The Patreon members, of course, have been able to read the stories as they were released over the last year. So they have a heads up for it. But the stories, all of the stories were selected from an open call. There were no anchor authors like we usually do for our themed anthologies. So I chose them all. I edited them. So basically, I read all of the open call stories and I picked out my favorites. It's something I've always wanted to do, and because I always felt like there needed to be an open market where anybody could submit and everybody had an equal chance, basically, of getting into the magazines. So that's the ZNB Presents Year 2. It goes all over the place. It's science fiction, it's fantasy, it's all of the subgenres. There's, alternate history in there. There's steampunk in there. There's things that, honestly, I don't know if I could classify it under a specific genre because it's all mixed up and twisted. And so basically, if you just like really good, in my opinion anyway, really good short stories, and a wide variety of really good short stories, then I strongly suggest that you pick up ZNB Presents Year 2. I don't have a book to show you because we still don't have art for the last couple stories, which are coming out over the next 6 weeks or so. So once all of the art's in, then I can get the book actually submitted and maybe have a nice copy to show people after that. But the cover art is really, really cool. It's by Justin Adams. Hopefully when you see it, you gasp a little bit and decide you have to buy the book no matter what. So check that out. That's coming up again, like I said, July 1st. And again, it's not our typical theme anthology. It's just totally random stories that I happen to like from the open call that we held. So check that out. We'll have new themed anthologies later this year.
Van, how about you? What are you bringing in?
Well, I've got two because I've never done it before, but I decided I would try to. I did a shorter book in a very short amount of time, and then the other one I'd been working on for 20 years and was getting close to finishing it, and I thought I could put them out together on Kickstarter and people could pick one or the other or both and kind of give a little variety, and they're both brand new, so that's what I did. I just held the other one for a couple of months and put them both out. So I'll do them as concisely as I can and still give you a sense of what they are. So the first one that took 3 months to write is Union, which is it's a tribute to Valiant Comics in the 1990s and Barry Windsor Smith. And there was a character in Valiant Comics, very quickly, that was called Magnus Robot Fighter. He could karate chop robots and destroy them. And I always thought, that's one of those things that works in comics, makes no sense in any other medium, right? Just doesn't. But I'd always wanted to do a story with a character who had a force field around him, because you could have advantages from that, but there are also disadvantages, And when I started thinking about Magnus, I thought, what if he had a force field around him, and that's what's able to break the robots? And then I thought, oh, well, if I was going to do a kind of an homage to Magnus and have him a guy with a force field, then I need to have a guy like XO, the Roman, like the barbarian from Roman times. So I had to get a Roman centurion in armor. There he is. And then I needed Dr. Solar, so I needed a professor that turns cosmic. And so suddenly you have Gladiator, Centurion, and Dr. Wait, which doctor is it? Oh, Dr. Torrens, yeah. And then you need the Eternal Warrior to tie the whole thing together. So I have John Smith. That's the current name he's using. So this is basically post-apocalyptic. Earth has been invaded, and these three very strange, diverse characters come together to save the world, traveling all through time, all orchestrated by an immortal who goes back in time to get these different pieces to put them on the board. So that's Union. Kind of my tribute to Valiant Comics, Jim Shooter, Bob Layton, and of course, Barry Windsor Smith. Now, the bigger one, the one I've been working on for 20 years, I just wanted to do one really big novel in my life. Most of my novels are between 200-300 pages, right? So, Alpha Omega is 800 pages. This is my magnum opus, big military sci-fi novel. It's set in about 100 years in the future, and the premise started with Space 1999, right? Where I said, okay, you've got a moon base with these international scientists and astronauts on it. And I said, wouldn't Space 1999 have been cooler if in the first episode, the Russian commander hadn't left as as Martin Landau's American commander came on. What if the Russian commander had stayed and you'd gotten the Russians versus the Americans and maybe the British and kind of a Cold War on the moon, right? That would have been way cooler than just, dealing with whatever British voice that people of Alpha that they felt every week, right? So then I put it on Alpha Centauri. So the little vehicles they fly are Centaurs. They got Griffin buggies. They have Medusa fighters, that kind of thing. It all just kind of flowed from there. And so this is basically 800 pages of military sci-fi of the Americans against the Russians. And the thing is, there's only 3 Americans. And so they have to go up against basically a fleet of Russian ships heading toward Alpha Centauri. They have to get there first. They have to get some Marines along the way to help them. Then they have to persuade all the scientists on the base at Alpha Centauri that they're not the bad guys. The guys coming in this fleet are the bad guys. And, of course, the scientists don't trust anybody. So there's a mutiny. There's a hostile takeover of the base. There's a bunch of battles on the surface of the moon and in orbit. It's very much of a military sci-fi. I'd done a lot of space opera in the past, but I'd never done a real near future military sci-fi. So, and I kind of was inspired not only by Space 1999 in terms of the idea, but I wanted to do a big, rich story like I would say the 2 books I had sitting on my table the whole time I was doing the last version of it were The Winds of War, Herman Wouk's The Winds of War, where you got all these different characters as a war is starting. And then James Clavell's Noble House, where you have lots and lots of cross-cutting plots and subplots. And they're both big books, right? So I wanted to do just my big James Clavell, Herman Wouk, but as sci-fi rather than historical fiction, right? And so that's it. And those 2, again, they both just came out. The Kickstarter got about triple what I was looking for, so I got a big pile of boxes over there I'm about to mail out to all the backers. I'm very excited. And so, yeah, so that's the 2, Union and Alpha Omega.
Yeah, don't drop that on your foot.
Yeah, really. 20 years.
Yeah, it took you long enough. I mean, really?
It took a little, yeah. 6 drafts.
So, Layla, let's talk a little bit deeper about the saints and sinners in your world. Let's talk a little bit more about, how are they developing this particular book?
Well, before I get started, I should have introduced you to my writing companion who has pretty much sat in the chair with me through all of the pages and the handwritten pages. This is my bear. He is my buddy, and he hangs out with me and pretty much travels with me. Most of this book was actually written in Blackpool, England, for Indie PrideCon back in March when I was out there. So me and the bear went traveling and we went writing. And when I say it's a continuation, it's truly a linear, picks up 2 days after the previous book ended, because that's how long it took the one group to get down from Colorado out to where the other crew is at. And Saint is seen in the second book sporadically. He is the president's brother, and he's actually the vice president. Sin you see in Cody's story because Sin is legally blind. He can see light and shadows, but he works with his hands, and he is really good he's a mechanic that can work with his hands and feel his way through the parts and figure out what's wrong with them and take them apart, put them back together. And to kind of give some backstory on him, when I was in high school, my dad built bikes. I mean, he would go find a frame, and our project would be to build these machines together. So when I turned 18, I got to ride to Laconia with him for the first time on this Triumph chopper that we built from a frame he pulled out of a snowbank in New Bedford. And so there is an old, he's actually at the, there's an old biker in the story. His name is Dawson. He's at an assisted living home. And the guys have pretty much brought this trailer to the parking lot. They've got it set up where he can be out there in his wheelchair giving advice to these young guys and helping them build. And he's kind of based off my dad. And him and Sin really click because Sin is this younger guy, but he's got this disadvantage, and he's out there trying to prove to them that he belongs with them every bit as much as anyone else on his own merits. He refuses to wear a patch or anything saying he's property of anyone or belongs to anyone, even though he does technically belong to Saint and he's Saint's partner. Maybe if he'd been wearing that, he might not have got snagged the way he did. But then you have Knight, which I hadn't mentioned before. Knight is a prospect, and he is also their third. And Knight is a very interesting character because he comes from this kind of separatist lifestyle. Like his family is very much anti-government, anti-establishment. We live out here in the middle of nowhere on our own. But part of why they do that is because they are thieves. They are professional thieves. Like, we're talking Fast and the Furious on motorcycle meets, whatever smash and grab, shoot 'em up robbers. That's what he grew up in. And so he's made it out of there. He's made it down to these guys. And part of what he likes about that is that they are going legit. And Knight, who has pretty much done time for theft and robbery and stick 'em up jobs, really just loves the fact that they let him go in the bar and make all the bar food he wants. And he creates some amazing stuff because he loves being in the kitchen. So you've got these three unique personalities that were starting to get together in book 2, and then Sin goes missing. And Saint's kind of like, I will burn the country to the ground hunting for you. And he is just going around and he's trying to find him, and everyone's following along. And then they get their first clue and they're like, this may not be what we thought it was. And that's why I said I don't want to give any spoilers, but I'm probably going to infuriate people who read book 2 and are like, oh my God, he's in so much trouble. Book one ended with a shootout. Book 2 had some pretty violent stuff in here. There's actually no violence, very little violence. I won't say none, but very little in this book. Nothing to the degree of the first 2, because they're now focused on family, and we're getting to see the family aspect of club life and really like how everyone is interacting and how they come together, not just finding him, but there's a few surprise characters that will pop up from book 1. And you'll kind of get to see what's been going on with them as well, and how they've used their ill-gotten gains to create this lifestyle that they're not going to go to jail for every other week.
Nothing like a shootout to get to that happy ending.
Yeah, the shootout in book 1 was a bit intense because I definitely angered readers who literally thought I was about to kill one of the 3 MCs at like chapter 29 of the book. So everyone's, it's a romance. So it was supposed to be happily ever after. And they got to chapter 29 and they're like, wait a minute, what do you mean one of our MCs just got blasted through this window? And hold on a minute, you can't kill the MC right before the happily ever after. I won't tell you how that book ended, but it did. I seem to like with this series to keep my readers a little bit heated with me, but it definitely has meant they've come back for more. Book 1, which is Burning Luck, and features one of my favorite character names of all time, Lucky Strike McAllister. Got the 2017 runner-up Golden Flogger Award for the LGBT category. So it was ended up being a lot of fun to write. And from there, it's just kind of been even more epically fun, hilarious, brutal, just a lot of things all spun together.
So Nancy, let's dive a little bit deeper into who are we hanging out with in this one as the family grows.
Well, to back up just a little bit, the origin of this world, this universe, happens in what has become a single volume called the Forest War. And at the end of the Forest War, all of the dragons left the world except for one. They didn't really leave the world. They went to another part of the world and agreed to stay gone. So then you have the Nature Walker trilogy where you meet Jin and Sath. Jin is the Nature Walker. Sath is the Raja of Katunari. They don't know that at the beginning of the trilogy. That kind of comes out as they go along. And then comes the Guardians of Arana series, where I like to say when I'm talking to readers that I liked some of my side characters in the Nature Walker trilogy so much that I gave them books to play in of their own, which is sort of how that one goes. Darkness is about Jin and Sath, and actually that's where Kazka, the daughter, comes into the picture. But there are 2 more books before we get to Kazka's, so they're all standalones, but they kind of have an overarching dependency on each other. I'm real codependent, so I decided to write it that way. There's strong found family vibes in everything I write anyway, so I thought it would be interesting to see what happens when we have actual blood family involved. And like I said, this is starting for a new series for the younger adventurers, and so that we don't just keep Sath and Jin out running through the forest, doing the Robin Hood thing until people get tired of it. But in Hero, we've been through 3 books: Darkness, Red, which is about one of my favorite characters ever, Ternianak, who is a sorceress and is real feisty. And then The Temple, which is the return of the big bad, the god of the underworld. And it talks about how he's trying to just kind of infiltrate where he can to orchestrate his large comeback. So then when you get to Hero, we're not really sure who the big bad is until the very end. And it's not, it even surprised me. I admit that I am a pantser of a writer. So by the time I got to that and that idea popped in my head, I went, oh, well, yeah, of course. And threw everything out and reworked the whole ending. But there's a lot of palace intrigue. There's a lot of races pitted against each other, which I hate to say, but when I say that, I mean feline humanoids against elves, against dwarves, against that kind of thing. It's all building to a big overarching conflict that's going to involve all the big bads in the world. But in the smaller sense of this book, I wanted to look at the fact that the Katu, which are the feline humanoids, have never had a female ruler. And I find that to be problematic, as does the villain in this tale. And so while they are sorting out being parents and they are sorting out their duties as guardians to stand, there's a group of guardians that are trying to keep the dragons from coming back and basically the balance of the world from shifting again. And now they have added to it being parents as well as leaders of their respective peoples and all this responsibility. So you have that going on at the same time that there's this something that's brewing in the background that is threatening the throne, Sath's throne of Katunari, and potentially the balance of the rest of the world. And it's a look at that. It's a look at why there haven't been female rulers. It's a look at Casca as, is she going to become the heir, or is her older brother going to be the heir? There's just a lot of little different themes that I decided to play with in this one, instead of, like I said, making it just a straight up epic fantasy, go on a quest, find the bad guy, collect the loot, and we're done. It's a little more introspective. Red was this way too. Red really looked at some of the reasons that my sorceress Tarn does the things she does. So that's what we're looking at in this one. And it goes everywhere from the palace to the great forest where her mother's from, to the void, which is where the gods live and where people, anybody who dies on Arana goes to the void first before they end up in whatever their respective tradition dictates for their afterlife. So it did get a little bit sweeping there in the middle, but most of my books do. That's part of being a pantser. You're doing everything that you like, and then you're like, wait a minute, okay, let's refocus, which is when that character came to me. But that is Hero, and it comes out mid-June, and I'm very excited. But from the beginning, when I started looking at Sath and Jin as 2 souls that were in a relationship, you know, you want them to do what every relationship does, which is have kids and continue their line and all this. And the fact that they're both leaders means they kind of have to do that. But I've put it off until now, getting to actually meet this offspring. She's mentioned at the end of Darkness, through Red, and through The Temple, which is the 3rd one, because these books sort of happen at the same, they're happening at the same time, but they're looking, like I said, at different characters that I wanted to give their own little playgrounds to play in. So they do tie together, and this may be the last one in this series, or it may not be. I don't know yet.
All right, JD, let's go with a little bit more about who we're actually hanging out with in this one.
We're hanging out with so many people and so many interesting knuckleheads that just insist on bringing out sides of me that I didn't know that were there.
Who's our key player in all this?
Oh, the key player. Okay, it's Nathaniel Reynolds. That's a human. There are two humans in this story. There's Nathaniel Reynolds, and then there's Elliot, Father Elliot, because obviously the villain is a preacher. There are some people that are morally gray. This guy is not morally gray. He sees things pretty black and white, and he doesn't think God has done a good job, and he wants to take the job over. So he's basically doing and acquiring and moving things so that he can invade heaven. The challenge is that in Hayuna, in the mid-dimension, there's a cloud of angels that are constantly warring that will not allow anyone get into heaven. So how are we going to get around that? You got to read and find out. So Elliot and Murmur are the two main villains that are still alive and that have still made it. Murmur is 8 feet tall. He's mean. He wears the flesh and the faces of his victims because he doesn't want to show his face. He's like the Max, but a demon. Just bad. And Elliot makes him look like he's nothing. Elliot, he's 5'3". He's got a comb over. He is unremarkable in every way, and every time that a demon sees him, they go like, "Oh no, here comes trouble." And anyone who knows who he is does not want to be anywhere in the vicinity. The word vicious comes to mind. The word cruel comes to mind, and that someone enjoys what they're doing that much should be a crime in and of itself. So everyone is trying to do what they can to stop this guy from doing what he wants to do. They don't know how he's going to get there. They do know that he's going to get there. And they do know that the entrance to heaven is guarded by a warring cloud of angels. Hayun has gone through some drastic changes. In book 2, it looks like Dark City. In book 3, in Beyond Human, it looks like a worn-torn city that more than half the population has been wiped out, and anyone who's still alive is either picking sides or just doing their best to avoid it. Things are bad. Things are going to get worse. And our heroes have to figure out a way of how are they going to get to the mid-dimension. Obviously, they have to go to the underworld. How do they get to the underworld? They have to enlist the aid of a wonderful small Asian woman called Lady Chiyo. She is also 5'0", and she has a 7-demon bag. If you kind of get that reference, that does show that I'm also a big fan of Big Trouble in Little China. So try to imagine a female version of Egg Sheng, but first off, she dresses better. Second off, she fights better. And third off, again, when people see her, they go like, "Uh-oh, here comes trouble." Try to imagine that the leaders and the fathers of the vampires, it's not Dracula, spoiler, and the father of the Therians, there is no, I don't know, I don't know if there's a king of the werewolves, and don't tell them that I said that. So try to imagine that the father of the Therians and the father of the vampires look at this woman, they go like, "Who the hell are you? And what is going on?" This is she is a powerhouse, and she is the owner of a house of 1,000 doors. Why 1,000 doors? Because one of those 1,000 doors is the key for them to get to where they have to get. Do they know this immediately? Obviously not. Is this a spoiler? Oh, trust me, to get there, they have to go through it. They have to explore all these things, and there is a detour to the underworld and to hell, but specifically a place called the House of Death. And when I say that it's the House of Death, please don't think of Rob Zombie. I enjoy some of his tracks, but not so much that movie, The House of a Thousand Corpses. This is literally different incarnations of death who are not keen on letting some of our characters stay alive because they have survived and they shouldn't have. So as you can see, it gets complicated, it gets dense. And how are they going to get there? Is everyone going to get there? The first question, you got to find out. The second question, unfortunately, no. This book took a lot of years to complete because there have been so many losses from people that mean a lot to me. Their art and their music means a lot to me. Mark Lanigan was one that we lost last year, and it's like, what the hell happened? Chris Cornell, that one affected me for about 3 weeks. Everyone was like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I'm not. So this also includes tributes to them. I listened to a lot of their music, and I wanted to do a send-off to these heroes of mine that are no longer with us. Throughout all this, it's not enough that we have angels. It's not enough that we have Therans, but there are also photogeni. Photogeni are basically cousins of the Ents from Lord of the Rings, except that, again, it's the exploration of humanity. They don't speak slow. They don't go and stuff like that. We see one of the roots, some of the saplings in book 1. These are mud children, literally kids made of mud that are just running around, and they're super cute and super sweet. You have mud, you have roots, you have branches, you have leaves, you have all of these branches that are super organized. And obviously you have the Yggdrasil. It's not a big tree as they mentioned in the Nordic mythology. It's actually the elders. Huge ass trees, huge ass vistas, huge ass. Try to imagine Fiddler's Green. Well, that has its own personality, and that can actually fight too. All of these people are also contributing and collaborating because they're like, you know what? This whole thing about being alive, I kind of like it, and I want to keep it that way. And this pesky little human has other ideas, and the idea of this human, he's like, okay, so I have to sacrifice a couple of species. I don't mind.
Well, we all know that humans are, of course, the worst monsters.
Oh, we are the worst monsters, and Elliot is awful. I took great pains in making him as absolutely hateful as possible. I was like, how can I top this? And then I got an idea, and I'm like, that'll make someone puke. Cool.
Joshua, how about you? Who are we hanging out with?
Okay, well, the main character, the mathematician, I felt you shudder again. The main character, yes, his name's Devin. And like I said, he is struggling at the college, and but he comes from the slums. So, you know, this is like his one chance to kind of get out of the lower part of the city. And so he feels like he has to succeed at this. Otherwise, he's just going to slump back into the lower city and end up basically dying in the lower city and whatnot. So, you know, it's kind of personal for him. But what happens is he runs into another mage. Well, not another mage, but runs into a mage named Lane, and she's struggling too. Like, she can't seem to do the magic, and she can't even seem to do the basic stuff that allows her to do magic, even though she has the ability. And so they end up teaming up. And he ends up showing her what he's discovered about the magic system. And lots of people will be disappointed because there's no love interest in this at all between the two. It's because Devin, my main character, is actually gay. But they end up teaming up, and he ends up showing her, you know, how the magic works and everything. And what they discover is that the reason she hasn't been able to do the magic is not because she couldn't learn the sigils to do it. It's because it's all politics. the mages that run the college basically are against Lane's mother, who's on the council. And so they're trying to force her to fail, basically. So they haven't been showing her what she needs to know in order to succeed. And so the two end up banding together. And then, of course, like I said earlier, the politics gets into it. We have the cities are heading toward a war. They're not there yet, but they're starting to like attack each other a little bit. And so all of this is coming to a head. At the same time that they're screwing around with the magic system, essentially, and so of course they get pulled into all of the politics and all of the war, even though they're basically 15-year-old, 16-year-old kids and whatnot, because everybody suddenly realizes that if they know how the magic works, then they need to be controlled. And they need to be controlled by us because we want to have all the power and whatnot. So they get pulled into it. And then one of the other things I'm playing around with, and if you read my older books, you'll realize I'm been steadily heading in this direction all along the way. Is that I'm writing fantasy novels. Yes, they're fantasy novels, but every time I write a new series, I keep working in more science fiction. So this is, out of all of my trilogies, this one's the most heavily sci-fi. Like when you're reading it, it is not your standard fantasy world. There's not any elves or dwarves or anything. The world is basically this gigantic city. It's on top of a mesa. And then while you're reading, you'll start realizing that a lot of what the characters are dealing with and playing around with is heavily influenced by science. So I'm kind of doing a little bit like what Anne McCaffrey did with her Pern series, where when you start the series out, it seems like there's dragons and dragon riders, and it's very fantasy oriented and all of that. But then as you read deeper and deeper into her series, you start realizing, oh, wait, no, this is a science fiction setting. And you learn that the dragons come about from, genetic engineering and, all this kind of stuff. So that's what's happening in this, is the book starts off and it's fantasy, but there's all of these trappings of sci-fi in it. And then as we go through the series, it's going to get like a little more heavily sci-fi. It's like a Badlands world. So there's not a whole lot of vegetation and all that kind of stuff. And the cities are all on top of mesas. And the only way to get from one to the other is on I call them wayfares. But it's basically elevated road. Because if you go down onto the actual ground, it's very deadly. And so I'm playing around in this a lot with the idea of a fantasy setting, and sci-fi setting, and trying to mix them, blend them. And if you look at my series, my first series was very, very, obviously just fantasy. And then the next series I worked in more epic fantasy. But then by the third series, you start seeing all the sci-fi trappings behind it all. Because the three trilogies are all connected. And then this one's different world, but I leaned much heavier into the sci-fi in this one. So I'm trying not to spoil too much from it, because if I say too much about Devin and Lane and whatnot, then everything gets ruined. So so that's that.
All right, Van. Who are we hanging with in yours?
Well, I said a little bit about the characters in Union, and the other thing I just mentioned really quickly about Union is that there's been an alien invasion of Earth. It's about 500 years in the future, and so the main characters are just trying to make their way in this world where an alien dominating force rules the planet with a whole bunch of robots, and of course those are robots that my guy gets to beat up, right, with his force field ability and everything. So but the characters in Alpha Omega, one of the things that I really loved about being able to do a book this big is to be able to spend a lot of time with the characters and kind of get deeper into them as they go through. And that's what I love about it the most, honestly, is that there are really three groups. You have the three American naval officers, Captain Jack Corrigan, who's just more of a kind of an upright, heroic captain, and then you have Commander Sean McGuire, who is his right-hand man that's been with him through thick and thin, and then their new recruit to their little group is Lieutenant Kara Wolf, who doesn't exactly know if they're really heroic or just kind of crazy, because they're always talking about, we got to watch out for the Russians, and she's like, they just don't like the Russians. Maybe it's them that's the problem and not the Russians, So they kind of have to, she has to be won over if they really are a threat in this story. Then there are the people on the moon, on the moon base, the Alpha Centauri, moon of a gas giant of Alpha Centauri A. And they are mostly scientists, security officer. There's a small military force there, but nobody ever dreamed that you would need a military force on this moon of Alpha Centauri 4 light years away. So, they're not prepared for any real threat. They don't even have like rabbits on that moon. There's nothing you don't need a military. They're basically there. Like every time we cut over to what's going on the Alpha Centauri moon, there's the security chief, Manny Reyna, and there's the head of the military force, Rico Kawase, and the two of them are just like hanging out, drinking beer in the little officers club thing, because there's nothing for them to do, really. It's all good. It's just a bunch of nerdy scientists studying rock formations and stuff. So they're just, so they have no idea what's on the way. So there's the first clash, is the Americans trying to convince these scientists, you need to learn how to shoot your gun and know who to aim it at, and it's not us, right? And then the third group are the Russians, and we get to know several of their officers and enlisted people, and kind of see what their motivation is, where they're going. And so when all three of them kind of come together in the final act, you sort of understand the motivations behind all three groups, and it's not completely clear how they're going to fall into place and who's going to be on which side, And then there's also the challenge that you've got a fleet of UN ships that have been taken over by the Russian military, by Spetsnaz, by Roscosmos. They're coming in to take over, to seize the whole moon, on their way to a whole other, down this wormhole to another planet they've discovered. They want to take over 3 planets. They want to take over Earth. They want to take over Alpha Centauri. And they're wanting to go down and take over this new planet. And how in the world are 3 naval officers and some scientists going to stop that? So it almost becomes like space Home Alone, where you rig up traps, right? You've got scientists and technicians. They've got to figure out a way before the Russian fleet gets there to set traps for the Russians. That could be in orbit. That could be down on the planet, in the base. It could be in the caves, right? Whatever. So they've got to be very creative and clever as to how, because otherwise they have no chance. So it was a lot of fun, and this is one of the reasons it took so long to write it, putting together the whole idea of how, these really smart but very nerdy and not very militaristic scientists have to figure out a way to stop the entire Russian military. And that's kind of where it goes. And so again, I do, in terms of the characters, I think that it's neat to be able to get to know both the good guys and the bad guys and have some depth to everybody, and not just because I've done a lot of superhero stories where it's very, cardboard. It's on purpose. That's the way it's supposed to be. So it's a nice challenge to do some more in-depth characters like that.
Joelle?
Well, I mean, trying to just, I don't want to give away too much, but basically this is an urban fantasy with some romantic elements. It's a romantasy with urban fantasy. I don't know, pick a genre. The biggest compliment I just got actually was Amazon sent out a pre-order announcement for the book, which I wasn't expecting. I just got it in my email. And the comps they gave me were Alona Andrews, Jennifer Estep, and Faith Hunter. And I was like, I'll take it. That's awesome. Thank you so much. So if you like those, Amazon thinks you'll like this book. So that's all I can say on that. But, it's about found family. So there's, all these characters that come together all over the place that come, that wind up creating this family. And a big theme through a lot of my stuff is not just found family, but the second big theme, which is unintended consequences. So Bex makes a ton of decisions, all for the right reason, but there are consequences to it, and some of them aren't good. And she has to deal with the fallout. So, just like I said in the very first book, she makes a decision. It's not a great one, and there are some ramifications, and then it literally kicks off the whole series with decisions that come on after that. And so, we see this a lot in this particular book. So there's sort of two things going on in this book, and Bex's focus is on trying to get Pinky's powers back, and that takes her to Fairy. And then the rest of the Scooby Gang is working to try to keep the worlds tethered. Some of the DNA that holds the worlds together has unraveled due to something that happened in the last book. And so they're working together to do that. And then it all sort of comes together in the end. So you've got all the characters playing different parts. This is the last book was the first time that I jumped out of Bex's point of view into other characters' point of view. And this one has even more of that. So you're starting to see like Lucifer has a point of view, and a dark witch named Gemma has a little bit of a point of view, and Asher, her love interest, has a point of view, and Gregory, the very well-dressed mobster, has a point of view. And we're starting to, in this sort of second set of three, not to expand out of Bex's point of view and to really get to know some of the other characters and their internal monologues and the things that they're saying. So I think that that's something that is fun for readers who have been reading since from the beginning. But one of the things that I'm pretty proud of is that if you didn't read from book one and you wanted to start at Wish Magic or this book, Pinky Promise, you can. I think it's better when you start from the beginning, but I like to read series in, total. But you can absolutely pick up this book and understand it and follow the plot and enjoy the characters and still, and come away feeling like fulfilled, not like you missed a lot. So hopefully people will want to pick it up, and maybe if they like the dog, they'll go back to the beginning.
Well, guys, it sounds like we've got everybody stacked up for those to-be-read piles. But before we get out of here, let's make sure they know where to find you guys. Website, social media, and, of course, this book that they need to be picking up. So, Joelle, where can we find you?
You can find me at slipperywords.com, which is my website. If you type in jdblackrose.com, you'll get there too. That's my website. You can follow me at JD Blackrose on Facebook and on TikTok. So I'm pretty easy to find, but slipperywords.com is the blog where you can sign up for my e-newsletter.
Layla?
You can find me on Wix. That's where my website is, Layla Dorine, Wix.com. I have a blog. It's usually a daily blog, but it's Rainbow Lyrics and Mellow Mushrooms. You can find snippets of pretty much everything in there. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. If it's a social media and not X Twitter, I'm probably on it. I do have a Ream account where there are free stories where you can read without a tiered membership or any of that weirdness. And this book, Saint Sinner, will come out on May 24th. It is a little bit of a twist on the biker subculture because ladies, really badass ladies, ride with them. I have not gender fluid characters, non-binary characters. It is found family to the nth degree.
Nancy?
I am at nancyedunne.com because if I don't put my whole name in it, I won't remember what the website address is. On that website, you can find all kinds of business about me, my books. There are excerpts. I'm working on getting excerpts from all of my books up there. I'm also on most of the social medias, including the X Twitter, the X Bird, at some, whatever the little beginning thing, it's either an at or on Facebook, it's a dot, but it's Nancy D_Writes. That's where you can find me. So pretty much if you just put that in a search engine, you should find me.
JD?
If I'm on a social media platform, it's going to be JD Estrada, right? I've been lucky enough to be able to get the same handle everywhere. I've seen some people that get too creative with that, and it's like, dude, leave that for the story. I do have a blog. It is jdestradawriter.blogspot.com. The website, I am pending to read your book, Mr. Nettles, so that I can get an idea of the stuff that I have to do, but then I get another idea for another book. And squirrel. For now, if you like angels, vampires, and vampires that do not sparkle, this took me a hot minute to finally publish. It's Beyond Human. It's Only Human, Shadow of a Human, Beyond Human, The Human Cycle. Have fun.
Joshua?
The main web pages are joshuapalmatier.com and zombiesneedbrains.com. You can find both of us on Facebook. You can find us on X. You can find us on Blue Sky. We only have one combined handle on Blue Sky. And you can find the books, any of the books from either my fantasy novels or the Z&B anthologies at our online store. And then, of course, we have the Patreon for Zombies Need Brains. And one of the tiers is also about my fantasy writings. So I think that's everything.
Van?
I'm at plexico.net and whiterocketbooks.com, and on Twitter, Van Allen Plexico, ALLEN there in the middle, Van Allen Plexico, at Van Allen Plexico. And let's see, for the rest of the year, you can see me. I'll be a guest at a MagicCon in Louisville in July, DragonCon again in Atlanta Labor Day weekend, and Archon in St. Louis in October. That's the rest of this year's activities.
And I'm Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, creatingprose.com, and of course here at ConTinual. Now go stack up those to-be-read piles. See you again soon.